2009, GM built a Corvette-powered Pontiac that outran Mustangs, outhandled BMWs, and cost under 40 grand. Then they killed it, and almost no one noticed. This wasn't a concept car. It wasn't some tuner fantasy. It was real. It had 415 horsepower, a 6-speed manual, Brembo brakes, and a growl that could rattle window panes. It was called the G8 GXP, and it should have saved Pontiac. Instead, GM buried it so deep they didn't even bother to advertise it. What you're about to hear is the real story of Pontiac's final muscle car. A car built in Australia, powered by a Corvette, and erased by its own creators. This is Speed and Style. Let's get into it. Part 1. The monster you never knew existed. Before Pontiac flatlined, they built something that didn't belong. It wasn't a FWD rebadge. It wasn't a retro gimmick. It wasn't even American. It was an Australian-bred Predator disguised in a Pontiac badge. And it was faster, better, and more refined than anything else they'd ever made. The Pontiac G8 GXP. Most people assumed it was just another forgettable sedan from a dying brand. But this thing? It was a secret performance weapon imported from a country where V8 still ruled and burnouts were practically a sport. Under the hood, the 6.2-liter LS 3 V8, the same engine found in the C6 Corvette, putting down 415 horsepower and 415 foot-pounds of torque. This wasn't a detuned variant. This was the real deal. And they gave you the option of a 6-speed Tremec TR 6060 manual transmission, no flappy paddles, no CVTs, no excuses. A proper muscle sedan. The G8 GXP hit 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds and ran the quarter mile in the low 13s. That was faster than the Charger RT, faster than the Mustang GT, and right there with early CTS Vs at a fraction of the cost. It wasn't just fast in a straight line either. This thing came with a revised FE3 sport suspension, Brembo brakes, limited slip differential, and a perfectly balanced chassis from the Holden Commodore VESS, an Aussie sedan engineered to tear up mountain switchbacks just as well as it did traffic lights. Inside, it wasn't luxury, but it wasn't bare bones either. You had bolstered seats, red gauges, and a no-nonsense cockpit that felt like it was built by people who knew what the hell a torque curve was. The result? A car that handled like a European sports sedan, launched like an American muscle car, and came from a brand that was already on life support. And nobody saw it coming. Part 2. The American brand with no identity. By the mid-2000s, Pontiac was lost. Once the rebel child of GM, birthplace of the GTO, the Firebird, and decades of street dominance, Pontiac had become a patchwork of cheap sedans and half-hearted rebadges. No vision, no identity. Just plastic body kits slapped onto rental-grade machinery. The GTO revival flopped. Not because it was bad, it wasn't. But it was awkward-looking, expensive, and arrived with no fanfare. The Solstice was fun, sure, but a tiny two-seater wasn't going to save a dying muscle car brand. Enter the G8. GM had a powerful rear-wheel drive platform, just sitting in Australia, the Holden VE Commodore. They needed a Hail Mary for Pontiac. So they imported the Commodore, gave it a new grille, and called it the G8. At first, it seemed promising. The base model came with a 3.6-liter V6. Meh, the GT brought a 6.0-liter VEE8. Now we're talking. But then they dropped the nuke, the GXP. It should have been a game changer. But it wasn't. Why? Because GM barely told anyone it existed. Seriously, dealers didn't promote it. Pontiac never ran real ads for it. Even inside GM, it was treated like a weird experiment. And with a price tag starting around $39,000, most buyers were confused why a Pontiac cost that much, let alone had a Corvette engine. The result? Only 1,829 GXP units were ever sold in the US. That's not just rare, that's criminal. This was the best car Pontiac had produced in decades, maybe ever. And yet most Americans never even heard of it. Because GM didn't just neglect Pontiac. They were preparing to euthanize it. Part 3. GMs Self Sabotage. Here's where it stops being a sad story and starts feeling like a setup. The Pontiac G8 GXP had the engine, the transmission, the handling, and the speed. It had glowing reviews from car and driver, motor trend, and real drivers alike. Hell, it even looked good aggressive without being obnoxious. So why didn't GM push it? Because deep down, they didn't want it to succeed. Sounds dramatic? Let's look at the facts. The G8 GXP was too good and too cheap for GM's own comfort. It was faster than a Cadillac CTS, sharper than a Camaro SS, and it cost less than both. Think about that. GM had spent years building up Cadillac as their luxury performance brand, sinking millions into CTS-V development, marketing, and dealer training. And now here comes this angry little Aussie wearing a Pontiac badge, blowing past the competition with a Corvette VS8 and a manual box, and doing it all for under 40 grand? That wasn't brand synergy. That was a threat. There are even rumors that GM corporate discouraged dealers from ordering GXPs. And it wasn't just marketing silence. Only about 25% of all GXPs came with the 6-speed manual, because most dealers didn't even know it was an option. They buried it on purpose. Then came the 2008 financial crisis, and GM needed to make cuts. When the US government stepped in with bailout talks, Pontiac was already lined up for the chopping block. The G8 GXP, collateral damage. But let's not pretend it was an accident. GM didn't accidentally kill their best muscle sedan. They just didn't want it stealing the spotlight from the brands they actually cared about. Part 4. Pontiac dies, but the GXP refuses to stay buried. When Pontiac died in 2010, most of its lineup went down without a fight. The G5? Gone. The Torrent? Forgotten. The Solstice? Missed by some, but never really given a shot. But the G8 GXP, that car didn't die. It went underground. Enthusiasts clung to it like a secret weapon. On forums, street racing circles, and Craigslist ads, whispers spread. This thing's got a Corvette engine. It's faster than a Charger. It's the best car Pontiac ever built, and no one knows. The GXP started rising in value. Low-mileage examples, especially manuals, became unicorns collectible in real time, not decades later. Because people realized what they had missed. This wasn't just a good car. It was the final chapter of American muscle's most rebellious brand. It was the last real Pontiac, and it didn't go down without a fight. Even now, G8 GXPs have a cult following. Owners aren't just fans. They're defenders of the brand, keeping the flame alive for a company that went out with one last burst of genius. And the thing is, GM knew the GXP was good. They just didn't want you to. Because a car like this makes people ask uncomfortable questions. Why didn't GM keep building it? Why wasn't it promoted? Why do they kill the cars that we actually want? The GXP became a symbol of all that. Rage, regret, and rebellion on 4 wheels. A ghost of what GM could have been. Part 5, the resurrection, and the final death. After Pontiac was buried, GM did something weird. They brought the G8 GXP back. Not officially, not with fanfare, and definitely not as a Pontiac. In 2014, Chevrolet quietly launched the SS sedan. A new badge, same bloodline. It was once again based on a Holden Commodore this time, the VF chassis. Still rear-wheel drive, still powered by the LS3 VEE8. Still came with a 6-speed manual and magnetic ride control. And it was even better than the G8 in almost every way. But history repeated itself. Chevy didn't promote it. Dealers didn't push it. Most people didn't even know it existed. They sold just around 12,900 units over 4 years. That's not just bad, it's basically self-sabotage on loop. Why? Because GM still didn't want a $45,000 sedan outshining their $70,000 Cadillacs. Because they didn't want to bet big on a VE8 rear-wheel drive platform when the world was moving to SUVs and turbo fours. Because once again, they built the right car and refused to support it. Then in 2020, Holden itself died. General Motors pulled out of Australia, shut it all down. The assembly lines that once produced the G8 and SS sedan were gone forever. That was the final death, not just of Pontiac, but of the philosophy behind it. The idea that performance and passion could still matter in a corporate boardroom. The G8 GXP wasn't just the last Pontiac muscle car. It was the last time GM accidentally built something great, and then killed it because they didn't know what to do with it. Because in the end, GM didn't just lose a brand, they lost their balls. So here's the truth. Pontiac went out with a bang. GM just made sure no one heard it. They buried the G8 GXP because it was everything they were too scared to keep building. Raw, loud, honest. It didn't fit the spreadsheets. It didn't care about brand politics. It just effing ripped asterisk. And that's why they killed it. End of story.